To really get what's happening in the headlines today, you've got to go back, way back. In this explainer, we're going to do just that, using our source material to walk through the long and incredibly complex history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So here's our roadmap. We're going to start in ancient history to understand why this land is so important. Then we'll jump to the 20th century and see how the fall of empires and the British Mandate really planted the seeds of the modern conflict. From there, we'll get into the wars, the displacement, and the attempts at peace that bring us all the way to today.
And that's the question, right? Where did this all begin? Because the roots of this conflict, they are deep. We're not just talking decades here. We're talking thousands of years of history, faith, and identity, all wrapped up in one place. All right, first up, we're heading back to ancient times. This is absolutely essential to understanding why this one piece of land holds such a powerful meaning for so many different people. Okay, so this timeline really lays out the incredible layers of history here. You can see the Jewish connection going back thousands of years, with Jerusalem as the capital. Then the Romans come in and give the region the name Palestine. A few centuries later, the Arab conquest introduces Islam, and suddenly Jerusalem is a holy city for a third major religion. And for the 400 years leading right up to World War I, the whole area was controlled by the Islamic Ottoman Empire. Now let's fast forward to the 20th century, because this is where things really start to heat up. After World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapses, creating this huge power vacuum, and these new political ideas start to totally reshape the region. And a huge piece of this puzzle is a movement called Zionism. As you can see here, it's a political movement that started in Europe. The goal? To create a Jewish national state right back in its ancient homeland. This wasn't just some abstract idea. It fueled major waves of Jewish migration to the region, which, really set the stage for what was to come. So after World War I, the Ottoman Empire is gone, and Britain steps in to take control. And, well, they start making promises to both sides that turn out to be impossible to keep. They issued the famous Balfour Declaration, which supported a national home for the Jewish people. At the same time, the Arab population living there was also hoping for independence. As more and more Jews fled horrific persecution in Europe, especially during the Holocaust, the tensions just exploded. It got so violent and so unmanageable that after World War II, Britain basically said, "We're out." Okay, this is it. This is the moment the conflict as we think of it today really catches fire. Britain is leaving, so the brand new United Nations comes in with a plan, and it is a very controversial one. So the international community's solution was basically to draw a line down the middle. The UN proposed splitting the land into two states, one for Jews and one for Arabs, with the city of Jerusalem becoming a kind of international zone. But here's where it gets really complicated. Just look at these numbers. The Jewish population was about a third of the people there, but they were allocated over half the land. Meanwhile, the Arab population, which was 2/3 of the people, was offered a much smaller piece. So you can see why this was a major reason Arab leaders flat out rejected the plan. So, with Arab leaders rejecting the plan and the British officially out, Jewish leaders decided to act. On May 14, 1948, they declared the creation of the State of Israel. And I mean, literally, the very next day, 5 Arab nations invade. This kicks off the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. A year later, when a ceasefire is finally called, the map looks totally different. Israel now controls even more land than the UN had proposed. Jordan takes over the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and Egypt occupies the Gaza Strip. And for Palestinians, this time is known as al-Nakba, which means the catastrophe. It refers to the more than 750,000 people who were either forced out or fled from their homes during the war. This created a massive refugee crisis that, to this day, has never been resolved. But the story doesn't stop there, not even close. Fast forward less than 20 years, and another war is about to change everything. Again, it would redraw the map and really set the stage for the next half-century of conflict. So in 1967, we have the Six-Day War. And in just a flash, Israel pulls off this decisive victory against the combined armies of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. The result? The map gets completely redrawn. Israel captured the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, and the Golan Heights from Syria. This moment right here is the beginning of Israel's long-term military occupation of the Palestinian territories. It's in this new reality that the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, really comes onto the scene. It was formed back in 1964, and it became the main group representing the Palestinian people, with the goal of creating an independent Palestinian state.
Okay, so the next chapter of this story is really defined by what it was like to live under occupation. Decades of that. Plus, the construction of Israeli settlements in the occupied territories led to widespread Palestinian resistance and, believe it or not, the biggest push for peace yet.
And that brings us to 1987, when a massive grassroots uprising erupts against the Israeli occupation. It becomes known as the First Intifada. This period of really intense, widespread protest and conflict eventually put enough pressure on both sides to actually start talking.
Those talks led to the Oslo Accords. This was a landmark agreement that created the Palestinian Authority. It also carved up the West Bank into these three zones you see here. Area A, under full Palestinian control, Area B, which was a mix of joint control, and Area C, which stayed fully under Israeli control. The whole thing was supposed to be a temporary roadmap to a final peace treaty. But that final handshake, that lasting peace deal, it never happened. The toughest issues, what to do about Jerusalem, the Palestinian refugees, and the ongoing construction of Israeli settlements, they just couldn't agree. The whole peace process fell apart, and in the year 2000, a much more violent Second Intifada broke out. And that breakdown brings us right into the 21st century, an era that's been shaped by a major split in Palestinian politics, the blockade of Gaza, and just this relentless and often devastating cycle of violence. So let's just run through the major events of the last couple of decades. In 2007, things get even more complicated when the militant group Hamas violently takes control of Gaza. This creates a deep political divide with the Palestinian Authority, which still runs parts of the West Bank. In response, Israel imposes a tight blockade on Gaza that's still in place today. Since then, we've seen several major wars there, controversial moves like the U.S. moving its embassy to Jerusalem, and these periodic explosions of violence like the one in 2021. So the source material we've been looking at wraps up by calling the whole situation a ticking time bomb. And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? After all these decades of war, occupation, and failed attempts at peace, it leaves us all with the toughest question there is. What on earth could possibly break the cycle?